Welcome to today's episode of the Working Wisdom podcast series, brought to you by the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston. We're having a conversation about work-life balance, how to navigate and overcome challenges within your career, and how to make business more accommodating to a diverse workforce.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Working Wisdom podcast through the Bauer College of Business. My name is Sophia Pierce, and I am a senior marketing major and sales minor here in the college. As I'm wrapping up my final semester of college, I am acting as a full-time program or assistant program manager in the college's Stephen Stagner Sales Excellence Institute and Program for Excellence in Selling. So with that being said, part of that role involves me working with some of Bauer's amazing faculty and has opened doors for me to do things like this Working Wisdom podcast and allowed me to host faculty and staff members. So with that being said, this season on Working Wisdom, we're focusing on sharing personal stories and best practices related to development and the ever-changing workforce. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting Amy Vandaveer, who is a clinical assistant professor in the Marketing and Entrepreneurship College here in Bauer. She also teaches personal branding at the graduate and undergraduate level in the Stephen Stagner Sales Excellence Institute and Program for Excellence in Selling, which is where I work. So I've had the privilege of knowing Amy for about 2 years now, and so I'm really excited to be able to host her today. With that being said, I'll pass it over to Amy to let her introduce herself.
Okay, thanks, Sophia. Appreciate it. So I am Amy Vandaveer, as Sophia mentioned, a clinical professor here in the Bauer College of Business. I've been associated with the university for 19 years, which is kind of crazy to think about it. I like to say I started when I was 10, so I'm the perpetual 29. But I come from a background of recruiting, marketing, and sales, and joined the faculty full-time in 2008. And so as an adjunct for the first 9 years teaching professional selling. I currently teach the introductory large mass sections of Marketing 3337, which is professional selling. And as you mentioned, personal branding within the Stephen Stagner Sales Excellence Institute, business communications in the MBA, and I led a study abroad on international marketing for graduate students as well. So that's a little bit about me and what I do.
Quite a bit under your belt right there.
Yeah, keeps you busy.
Especially for someone who's 29.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that being said, our topic of discussion today is going to be personal branding. And having been a student in Amy's personal branding class in the Program for Excellence in Selling as a student, and then working as staff and assisting in the Stephen Stagner Sales Excellence Institute, I really wanted to open up the discussion today and understand a little bit of your background and how personal branding became such a relevant topic to you.
That's a really good question, Sophia. I think it started when I was an undergrad. I went to Texas A&M University and studied English and communications, thought I was going to be a high school English teacher. And when I started being a student teacher, I was like, I can't handle high school. But I always had a passion for teaching, and then I really got involved in a lot of the traditions, in particularly Aggie Fish Camp and Aggie Muster. And you had to apply, you had to interview in order to be selected into those organizations. And that actually led to my very first job, which was as a recruiter. And so if you didn't do that well, you missed out on opportunities. And so I think that's where the seed was planted. I did, back in 1999, a mini seminar about how to sell yourself with the Program for Excellence in Selling when it was brand new then. And that also planted a seed for me to now be here full time. So I think personal branding is about understanding what value you bring and being able to communicate it effectively so that it works for the person you're speaking to. If it's an interview, it's for committee. If it's for a promotion, if it's for a sale.
Right. And I do know that you have a fairly extensive background with Reynolds and Reynolds and Texas Monthly, and have also worked with a startup company. So can you tell me a little bit about how personal branding played a huge part of what you did in those roles?
Well, when it came to recruiting, as I mentioned, I was involved at Texas A&M in a leadership role within those organizations. So as I stepped into leadership within Aggie Muster and Aggie Fish Camp, you had to interview committee members that were going to be a part of your camp or part of your committee. And that skill led me to my very first job, which was as a recruiter, because I had the opportunity to recruit outside salespeople as well as entry-level positions within the organization. And I had to develop good relationships with people in order to find the right people for within their groups, management in particular. So when it came to interviewing people, I had to look at, are they representing their brand well? And when I was going to present them to management, are they also a representation of my brand? And, like if I brought in bad product or bad position, they didn't trust me for vetting the right person for the position. So it started early in my career, being able to understand, do I know what I'm doing? Do I understand how to find the right person for the job? And then also how to really develop the relationship because when you're putting people in positions, it's not just a product.
Yeah.
You're putting the resources going to help their department run. And it was really, you had to develop that credibility early on by building the relationship with them, vetting the candidates, and then also, kind of going to bat for when you really believe that even if they didn't have the best interview, that they were a candidate that someone should take a chance on. And when it came into transitioning into sales, I did marketing here actually at the Bauer College of Business before I went into Texas Monthly. And it's the same thing. You have to believe in your product. To me, that's the fundamental whole thing. If you don't believe in your product, it doesn't matter, because 90% of communication is nonverbal. And so I really believed in the product of what Texas Monthly sold, the editorial, as well as the results that the advertisement would bring, because I had advertised here. I'm advertising in the magazine when I did marketing at U of H. And so it was easy for me to sell. But it's about building the relationships. Like when you go to Navasota, that's a very small town, versus like if you go to Waste Management. So you had to adjust. And when it comes to personal branding, it is about your reputation. Can you relate? Do you understand? Do you listen? And can you deliver on the expectations and actually exceed expectations? So I think that is where building my own personal reputation managed. And really that's how I ended up here full time. I had built a long-term relationship as a adjunct professor working within the Bauer College, and had a wonderful mentor in Randy Webb, who's our executive director, and he's an executive professor here. But he advocated for me to let me come here full time and teach. So I think personal branding really is about doing what you say you're going to do, your reputation, going above and beyond, and also really understanding what is it the other person wants so that you can make sure that you're the right fit for them. And if you're not, then you have to communicate that as well.
Right.
That was a really long answer.
It's okay. No worries at all. I think long answers sometimes have really great quality content.
Okay, I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but...
So now that we've heard a little bit about Amy's background, we're going to take a quick break to let some of our sponsors share what they have in store for you.
Join the conversation. Bauer College's Working Families Initiative is bridging the gap between industry and academia to create a conversation on how organizations can make the workplace more family-friendly. We're talking about flexibility, maternity and paternity leave, and career transitions. For more information about the Working Families Initiative at Bauer College, including upcoming events, visit bauer.uh.edu/workingfamilies.
Thank you so much to our sponsors for sharing, and jumping right back into where we left off. Can you, Amy, explain a little bit about your role as a professor at the undergraduate level within the Program for Excellence in Selling?
Sure. So what's interesting is the personal branding has been an evolution, and I think it was the very first seed was planted in that in 1999, in the very first mini lecture I did when I was a recruiter for Reynolds and Reynolds, about selling yourself. And that then over time led to Lunch and Learns. How do you do a resume? How do you interview? And that became a 1-hour lab, and then it evolved into a 2 double semester 1-hour lab, and then it evolved into a 3-hour personal branding course. And as the evolution started, I figured kind of like when companies look at, well, we've got strategies and tactics. Well, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know why you have the strategy, the tactics don't make sense. And so when it had the opportunity to become a 3-hour class, I thought students can have a good resume and they can answer the right questions and they can dress the right way. But if they don't know who they are and what they want and what they stand for, and what their goals are, then they're not going to be able to find the right company to launch their career. And so I went back and kind of really reevaluated that a really good brand, and this is true not just of people, but also of organizations, they know what their values are and they know what they want to accomplish. And so we've implemented that in the course, like identifying values, what are your core competencies, creating vision and mission statements, doing a SWOT analysis, goal assessment, and then putting in strategies and tactics before we ever look at an interview or we ever look at a resume or your LinkedIn profile or your social media. So that was kind of the big evolution that changed that I think really brings a value to students in the classroom, because the benefit of the Program for Excellence in Selling is we have 30 corporate partners that pay to get access to our students to provide them jobs. Well, and so they're in a way our product. But if a student doesn't know what they want, then they aren't necessarily really good at determining what job is right for them. And therefore, when they're a product that go out and then the company isn't happy because the students aren't happy, it's not a win-win. And we try to create a win-win by having the students better vet and understand what they bring to the table, so the companies also then have a better way to pick the right people for the job.
Right. That's a lot of really great information. And for students who might not have the opportunity to take that personal branding course, what are some of the strategies, aside from building SWOT analysis and sitting down and assessing their values, that you would recommend for them to build their own personal brand, or to at least become aware of who they are?
Right. That's a good question as well. I think it really comes down to, it's similar, the very same thing. Like, a good company knows what they stand for, and they spend a lot of time managing that and putting resources around that. And I think for a student, when you're coming in, you have to realize it's not about the degree, it's about who you want to become.
Right.
And if you get lost in the weeds around GPAs or organizations or leadership roles, then you're not really being focused on what is the end goal, what are the results of who I want to be when I walk across that stage, what kind of job opportunity do I want to have, and 10 years after that, what do I want my life to look like? So my biggest thing is to think, spend some time. There was a former student that said he had to sit down and have a cup of coffee with himself when he was evaluating several job offers. And I think that's a really great way to think about it. Sit down with yourself and say, what do I believe? What are the top 5 motivators that I have? And who do I want to become? And then you can build goals around that. Because if you don't have your foundation, you sit on quicksand. And if you don't have a direction and a vision for where you're going, then you kind of are just aimless. It's never a straight shot. But once I put those 2 in place, then you align yourself with a lot of opportunity to show up. And they come in really interesting packages once you really put it into play.
Interesting, to say the least. I remember sitting in your 33-37 class and then having gone through the program and being in personal branding and getting in there. And I'd look around and there were so many students who seemed like they knew what they were doing. And then when you gave us our value sheets and made us assess everything, I was shocked because I didn't know who I was, what I wanted. And so it was a really big reality check. And since then, I've definitely learned a lot about personal values and how it impacts who you are and what you do on a daily basis. So,
well, good. I also want to do, it was funny because Sophia, when she was a student, I told her I like to be organized. She said, I think you might like this planner, and it's called the Passion Planner. And what I ask students to do at the beginning of the year, you basically says, who do you want to be in 6 months, in 1 year? And you time yourself for 5 minutes. And I did it. And it was interesting how uncomfortable I was.
Really?
I'm like, yeah, well, because I hadn't done it in a while, but it was good to go back and reset it at the end of every month. So anyway, Sophia's putting into practice, which is great, which is why she's done very well for herself. So.
Thank you. It's appreciated. With that, though, in personal branding, you kind of touched on it earlier. You said something about social media. And with the internet making the world a smaller place day by day, Could you give us some insight onto how you think social media is changing and impacting people's personal brands?
How long do we have? I mean, I'm just kidding, because it could go on for
A long time.
It could go on forever around that one. There's a couple just key points that I'll hit on. Number one, I think we live in a world of 24/7, and our news cycle is actually probably about 6 hours now.
Really?
And I think that a lot of it is noise. And when you think about a brand, I think it's about very purposeful around what you want to share. And the other thing is, I think it's about realizing that when you share, you remove sometimes the authenticity of moments and being present, and that's always kind of my thing is, are you busy taking selfies on the right filter rather than being in the moment? And I think when it comes to having a really good personal brand, it's a balance of the two.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Working Wisdom podcast series from the C.T. Bauer College of Business, brought to you by the Working Families Initiative. The initiative aims to provide support and access for women in business school and the workforce, and to generate research that organizations can use to implement policies and standards to benefit a diverse workforce. For more information about Bauer College and this podcast series, visit www.bauer.uh.edu/podcast.